Hi everyone. I have a little bit of a shop organizational video for you. It's nothing earth-shattering. I was just thinking I'll show them how I go about designing a project and how I might put it together that might be a little bit different than somebody else. What I was thinking, I've got a lot of space underneath my workbench that's really not being utilized properly. And I have these storage bins for screws, nails, electrical items, that kind of thing. Really like them, but they kind of lock on top of one another. And to be able to get to the one, say you had 2 or 3, 4 on top, you'd have to remove all of them, kind of go through them, and then finally grab the one on the bottom out. So I was thinking about making a shelving unit that will fit over here. What I was thinking was 2 of these Milwaukees side by side and have each one on a different shelf so I can just pull one out individually without having to unstack the pile. So the first thing that I do is I measure my opening, and that tells me what size cabinet I'm going to be able to build. And then in this particular instance, I'm thinking about building these units separate so that I can pull them out at a later date and maybe stack them on top of one another, and then I could put them inside of a trailer or something of that nature. So let me show you how, just some of the things that I go through when I'm designing a cabinet like that. When we're talking about nails and screws, they get rather heavy. So each shelf has to be supported, really well. And the way that they do that conventionally is with dados. And a dado is just simply a groove cut into the plywood where this shelf would be recessed. So it would go in here but fit into a slot or a groove. That's a dado. You need a table saw and you need a dado head for your table saw. If you don't have fancy table saws with dadoing heads or routers set up to cut the dados, there's another way to go about it. And people say, well, that's more expensive, you're using more material. Usually, if you keep scraps around, this is ideal for scraps, and it makes such a strong cabinet. I'll give you an example. Let's pretend that this is the outside wall of my cabinet. I'll put a spacer in whatever depth that I needed, and then this will be my shelf. Look how it's fully supported. It's better than a dado because it's a full width. And then I'll put another spacer, whatever it needed to be, another shelf, and that will support a tremendous amount of weight. And that's how I'm going to build this little cabinet. Now, whenever I build a built-in, I like to actually use the item itself to make my dimensions. So in the example that I just showed you on making those shelves, I'm going to be trying to figure out what size shelf I actually need. So I want to be able to have this thing slide in and out easily. And remember, it fits underneath these 2 side pieces. That's what that demonstration a moment ago was about. And what I'll often do is just simply grab 2 speed squares and then measure between them. And that's 20.5. I can also do it to the front and the back and get my dimensions that way. So a little tip, when you're building a custom cabinet and you have a specific purpose for it, use the item that you're using. And it's quite difficult when you start talking about molded plastic. It's just not a flat piece. So grab some scraps and then measure outside of the scraps on how you're going to construct it. Let me show you how I cut my material. All right, this is what I use as a cutting station. It's just simply two sawhorses. By the way, I have another video on how to make sawhorses if you look back through it. But I just took a 2x4 and I ripped it in half. And then I use OSB as a temporary table. And then insulation board comes in 4x8 sheets. I just cut it down. And when I lay it down on my work surface, I allow the blade of the saw to go just a little bit into it, and it will give me a full support system for the plywood that I cut, or the lumber that I cut, without having it pinch the blade. Let me show you how I use it. Alright, the first thing that I do after I have my material fully supported on top of the foam and the cutting board, I do my first measurement. In this case, I'm going to go 14.5 inches. And then I take a T-square, put it right on my mark, and I mark it. That's where I'm going to cut. Now, if you're not familiar with this, this is called a track saw, and it's very clever. It makes extremely straight cuts. And this DeWalt comes with two different tracks. It comes with the cross-cut side and the full rip length, okay? And you just put your two marks on your plywood, and this will follow along that perfectly. I'll give you an example right here. You take this rubber edge and you put it directly on your line, and you put it so that the waste side is off of the piece, and I'll show you what I mean by that. This will ride smoothly dead on that line now, and the blade, the width of the blade, is going to be on the offcut side. That's what I meant. Let me show you how well this works. It's a straight cut. It's perfect, actually. Fully supported, no pinching blade, extremely safe. That's how I break down my material goods. So you saw how safe and simple it was for me to cut that large piece of sheet good. Now, if I was trying to cut that on a table saw, it would have been very difficult and quite dangerous. So having a fully supported with that foam backer board underneath it, boy, that's a game changer. And the track saw, of course, I think you're going to find that's going to become a lot more popular in the near future. All right, on to assembly. This is really quite simple the way that I go about it. I use two types of air guns. I use a 15 gauge finish gun, and I use a brad gun. And you can say, why are you using a brad gun? Well, I use these as mini clamps. What's really going to hold this cabinet together is glue. And by using brads, it'll hold it tight and allow that glue to set up. Let me show you how I go about this. Grab the bottom shelf. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue along the edge. Something like this, get it going. Okay, and for assembly, just watch your fingers. Remember, this is just to hold it together while the glue dries. Nice. Alright, now we're just going to be tacking in a couple of these supports like that, shelf will sit on it. Another set of supports, another shelf. It doesn't get any easier than this. So what I do, spread some glue, take a small stick, and remember, this is what's really going to hold this thing together, is the glue. And if you have excess glue, put it on your other piece, just like so. So we'll then put this here. And now I'm going to use a brad gun, and these small brads will act as a mini clamp. And then when you put in another shelf, this thing just starts locking together on itself. Now, as you can see, by using this build-up method, it's very strong. But some people, that's what the next one would look like. But some people out there are going to say, I would still like to have some screws in this. And I'm fine with that. But the problem is, especially if you don't use these support systems, or if they're just temporary, how do you get that accuracy, right, to find the center of a 3/4 inch board and make sure that you do it accurately and quickly? Well, here's a little trick for you if you decide that you wanted to use screws. If you look right here, oftentimes I'll take my pencil and I'll do that. And then whatever the thickness of the material is, we'll just use that one here. I'll go like this. So in this case it's 3/4 inch, but if it were a 1/2 inch, I would use a 1/2 inch board. Now can you see that? That's exactly where I need to be drilling, right in the middle. So I happen to have an example for you. It's a tapered drill bit with a countersink. So what I'll do is I'll go right in the middle. I'll come in a little bit so I don't split out the shelf. Okay. And I'll try not to do a countersink. So I gotta be careful not to push too hard. Because if you'll see right here, the countersink, I come back around on the other side. Now I can countersink. And the countersink is just to make the screw head flush. Now look how nice that is. Isn't that nice? See how that holds that? That'll allow that to dry and it'll be a really good bond. Alright, let's talk about glue and how I buy it and what type I buy. I like the Type Bond 2 wood glue. I buy it in the gallon, and I buy one of these and then I transfer it into a smaller workable bottle. Well, the last thing that I do is I put on a square panel on the back, and that racks this thing into square. If I wanted to, I could also put a face frame on this and finish it off as if it were a bookcase or some kind of cabinet inside the house. That would look really nice also. And as you can see, it's a success. I hope some of these tips have helped you. I'll catch you on the next one.